Welcome to the Year of the Movie podcast, the podcast where we talk about movies from the year of the movie 2023. I put a little jazz on that one. Could you tell?
Yep. That's my banter.
Yeah, good starting banter. Welcome everybody who's watching or listening. For our video viewers, the film that we were discussing today, Bryce has not seen yet, so he didn't want to get spoiled, and so it's just us today. No switchers, just the one camera. And for everybody, we are recording this basically at 10 p.m. Life finds a way to get in the way, and so we're recording it at 10 p.m. So we're gonna try to keep the energy up, but if it goes down,
it's past our bedtime.
It's not. It's just it's past our podcast time. So welcome. I'm Sebastian.
I'm Maggie.
And this is our podcast. Why did we start this podcast?
Why? 2023 is a weird year for movies.
Indeed it is.
And I think this isn't the weirdest movie that's come out this year, but we started this podcast to talk about all the different ones that have come out this year and just kind of highlight how it's a wacky year even before the strikes happened, and then the strikes happened, and now it's an extremely wacky year. And just, it's silly. Let's talk about it. And there are so many movies.
Every day, as this year goes on, we find more movies.
Yeah.
It'll be a blessing when we stop discovering new movies that came out this year. And I imagine it'll be months into 2024 we'll still be finding.
I don't know if we've specifically mentioned this. If we have, we can mention it again, but our plan right now for Patreon exclusive episodes is to do movies that have like a big anniversary year, or there's some like theatrical re-releases. So we will be talking about like Nightmare Before Christmas and Coraline, a couple
Batman at some point too.
Batman, the Christopher Nolan trilogy a re-release. So there are so many ways that we can find technicalities for movies to be a 2023 movie for us to talk about. We will never run out of them.
No. And before we get started, one more disclaimer. If we seem distracted, we are, and that's because outside of the room where you're recording, there's a bat. It's flying around. So, we're vibing.
We're gonna skip and come back to the bat.
Every few seconds we see it fly by the window. So, what movie are we talking about today?
We're talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
I love the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little insight into me, if you were curious.
I was. Yeah. I have been, I guess, a casual fan. For me, that just means I like the concept of the Ninja Turtles.
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't look too hard into it. I was just always aware of them existing and that April was a person, and that's like the extent of my knowledge. Was there turtles and a rat and a woman.
Yep, that's about all you need, really.
Hijinks ensue.
So this one is the one that came out, obviously, in 2023. It's an animated movie. Is this our first animated discussion? I think it might be.
It might be our first animated discussion. I would also say, arguably, this is our first, like, blockbuster. Or, like,
is it?
Actual blockbuster.
I guess it,
because like other ones have tried, but
this no D&D.
D&D, yes, that's right.
I'd say I don't think it was that wasn't a success in terms of the money that it made back, but that was a blockbuster. I'd say that was a blockbuster. Mm-hmm. So the synopsis for this one is: after years of being sheltered from the human world, the Turtle brothers set out to win the hearts of New Yorkers and be accepted as normal teenagers. Their new friend, April O'Neil, helps them take on a mysterious crime syndicate, but they soon get in over their heads when an army of mutants is unleashed upon them.
If you look up Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem synopsis, this is like the Google thing that is highlighted and is shown to you. This is so long.
It is. That's a long synopsis. Yeah. But I feel like with just that synopsis, it shows that they're taking a little bit of a different take with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and that like what they're really doing is trying to be accepted as normal teenagers. Obviously, that has always been a thing where the Turtles were like, we just want to be normal. Mm-hmm. But like it's never really a thing that like they can have. because they're mutants and they're all pretty aware of that.
Yeah. So what were your first impressions when you heard about this movie?
I was stoked.
Yep.
Because I love this franchise. It had a great cast. The trailer music was really good.
Mm-hmm.
And they were introducing characters onto the screen that hadn't really been shown on like the big screen.
Mm-hmm.
With all of their side characters like Mondo Gecko and all of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was excited when I first heard about it.
It seemed cool. I liked the vibe of the trailer that we'll talk about. We're going to talk about the first teaser trailer that came out. Yep. One, because for scheduling reasons, it was easier to look at the shorter trailer.
Yeah.
But yeah, that one was like, it was really good at setting the tone for and expectations for the movie. And then you've talked about it a bit, but how into the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise are you?
Yep, like I said, big time. I've read quite a bit of the comics. I will say the newer comics, the ones that started in like 2013, so it's a bit of a different take. But I also was that kid who couldn't afford comics, so I would just go on the Wikipedia and read about what happens in comics. So I did that with the original stuff. I never watched the original cartoon because that was obviously we're showing our youth before our time. But I loved the 90s live action movies. I grew up on those. We watched a show once that showed one image from the third one, and I said, "Oh yeah, that's from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3."
We were watching Actually, which is a Dropout show, and it's basically just Jeopardy but for like nerd and pop culture stuff. And there was hey, can you identify the movie based on this image? And it popped up, and you got it immediately. Because
I just know these. I know these movies, and I love this franchise. A little like, obviously this podcast is about the movie, but I'm gonna do a little bit of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles lore. Is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles exists because of the Daredevil comics? Because when Daredevil came out, that was a pretty dark comic. I mean, it still is, but like that was like a very dark comic for that time. It's, a kid gets blinded by this acid basically, and then he gets superpowers from that.
I hate when that happens.
But there are a lot of parallels because the creators of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were basically parodying Daredevil. The same acid/ooze that blinded Daredevil is the same ooze that the turtles go and walk in to become the mutants. And then the big organization that Daredevil has to fight is the Hand. And then in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the big organization they fight is the Foot. And then Daredevil's master was a guy named Stick, and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles master is Splinter. So like it was very much a direct like causality parody of Daredevil, which Daredevil is one of my favorite comics as well. And so I just think I love that they were like, but what if turtles were the ninjas though? Like what if we did that? And I think it's really interesting just like how far it's gone, because it started as a parody, and so like it was more like humorous, but then many runs have been more dark. More recently they had the Ronin comic line, which was about, it's like set in the future where one of the turtles is still alive, everyone else is basically dead. So he is a Ronin, and you read the comic not knowing which one survived. And obviously eventually you find out, but it was just really interesting. It's very dark and serious, and I just think it is interesting, like it kind of became what it was parodying, but like in a different and fun way and stuff. And but now we can talk about the trailer.
I will say I haven't seen any of the movies until we watched them or anything like that. So that was, more casual fan. So, do you want to talk about the...
Sure. And, we talk about the trailer for a few reasons. We can't show the trailer. One, that's not fun for audio listeners. Two, it's not legal. So we talk about it, and it's also just a way to, like, if you haven't seen it, then you can be like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting.
This one is, it was easy to recap in terms of events, but it's hard to, like, because a lot of it is, like, very good at being conversational. It's hard to recap dialogue in a way that doesn't feel stilted. So
and like this is the teaser trailer too, so like a lot of like teaser trailers are more montagey, more just like clips together, getting the vibe across. The song was Can You Kick It? Yes, it can. Yeah, and so it's like really jumpy and cool and fun and hip with the kids. But that being said, we start with slow piano music and we see New York City at night. The first credit slide says, "From permanent teenager Seth Rogen," before fading to another shot of New York. It fades again to a slide saying, "A new generation of heroes," before fading to our first good look at a city street with this particular animation style, and it fades to black, and it says, "We'll rise straight from the sewer," and on another slide up here. There's a shot from above of a sewer manhole cover, and the cover suddenly pops off, and the 4 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fly out. The music starts to pick up, switching to "Can I Kick It" by A Tribe Called Quest. We see the turtles on a rooftop. They're messing around with a phone camera, recording themselves using their weapons to slice a watermelon in half, and one says, "Let's try that again, but with ninja stars." The others look excited. The brother holding the watermelon...
I don't know their names except for Leonardo.
Okay, so the brother that was holding it was Michelangelo.
Okay.
And he says, "Why did we pick a fruit shaped exactly like my head?" And the other turtles give the response, "Stop talking, you're ruining my concentration," because, you know, they're about to throw the thing. And then they also say, "You're fine, chill." And then one of the other ones, I think Donatello, says it. He says he's gonna die because, yeah.
It's a ninja star.
Before the ninja star is thrown, the turtle screams and the ninja star goes straight through the watermelon and hits something in the street below, startling someone. Leonardo is concerned, but the others say, "Nothing we can do. You guys want to grab pizza?" I believe Raphael said that one. A title card saying, "This summer," comes up before a quick montage of the turtles all showing off their weapons, then briefly showing Splinter. The turtles look excited for a fight before being confronted with tough-looking humans who ask, "What the heck are those things?" While another says, "They look like the little Shreks to me." We then see brief shots of the turtles fighting, then a shot of Bebop and Rocksteady, who are characters in this universe, before a close-up of April O'Neil's eyes and baby versions of the turtles in training. So very quick cuts montage. There's the narration, "We've prepared our whole lives for this," and there are shots of the turtles making their way across a rooftop, and another shot of a large truck meeting a police barricade. We then see a turtle trip, launching his throwing knife around a garage, bouncing off walls. It's not a throwing knife, actually. That's a sigh. Whatever. Until landing in another turtle's leg. There's a brief pause before he screams, and the rest freak out that their brother was stabbed. There's some chaos from the reactions before the movie title comes up full screen. After April writes in her notebook and says, "So you were baby turtles who made contact with mystery goo?" And the turtles respond, "We prefer ooze," and then riff off on the word ooze for a bit before the trailer ends on a full screen graphic with voice cast listed.
That whole, like, the last 5 seconds basically is them all just going ooze over each other.
Ooze, yeah.
So
and that's they always say ooze like in the comics too, yeah. But the second live action movie from the 90s, its subtitle is Secret of the Ooze. Like, the ooze is always kind of what they say. So, you know, a little poking fun at that.
It's hard to recap that of like ooze.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was the teaser trailer. Obviously it's a lot of words that we just said, but it's, you know, a quick paced teaser trailer to get you hyped for the movie and an actual trailer.
I wanted to recap this one partially because I did it right before we started recording, and it is 10 o'clock, but then also because this was like, this one, like we were obviously interested hearing about this movie, that it was going to come out, but then I just feel like it set the bar really high for expectations of the movie and just the overall vibe of it.
Yeah,
and
definitely
then the last slide of just everyone's names on the screen.
It's a lot of names.
The cast is massive. And then obviously it's a teaser trailer, so it doesn't reveal a whole lot about the plot or potential villains, but it really just is like, here's the vibe set that you can expect 6 months from now. So like we said, cast is massive. We'll start talking about the movie now, I think.
Yeah, so if you don't want spoilers, I would say, you know, maybe stop listening now. But yeah.
Yeah, the cast is massive.
It's so okay. So the four main turtles are played by actual like teenagers.
Yeah,
which is cool. They, this was the first time that I feel like, in movie at least, maybe. And some of the cartoons they feel a bit more like kids, a little bit. But this was the first one where it was like, oh, these really are
these
teenage
are really
boys.
young. Yeah.
Yeah. So the cast is wild. Especially like. A lot of the characters talk for like a second.
It's honestly like cameos.
Yeah.
For a lot of them.
Yeah.
Because they just introduce so many characters in this movie. Like you said, like Rocksteady and Bebop. Yeah. Like those are pretty established characters. But then the whole movie kind of does that of like it introduces everyone for new audiences, but then it also does it so briefly that it kind of like it's not super significant unless you are super familiar with the franchise, and then you're like, that's not just like a bat, that's Wingnut. I know who Wingnut is.
Yeah. Yep. So April O'Neil was voiced by do you know I'm terrible.
Ayo Edebiri?
Ayo Edebiri.
Maybe.
She's April, and obviously April is a big character.
She's also in The Bear.
Yeah, she's doing great right now. She's in Bottoms, which we'll talk about at some point.
Yeah, excited for Bottoms. Just trying to see. There's one other Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, yeah.
And What We Do in the Shadows.
And then she also shows up in Abbott Elementary.
Yeah.
She's a writer and producer and actor. Like
she's everywhere right now.
Comedian. She's great.
Yeah.
Maya Rudolph voices the villain, or one of the villains, Cynthia Utram. John Cena is Rocksteady, and Seth Rogen is Bebop. Rocksteady and Bebop and Rocksteady. They are like probably some of the more established mutant villains in TMNT. Rose Byrne is Leatherhead. Natasha Demetrio is Wingnut, and she is most known for the TV show What We Do in the Shadows. She's great in that.
Every time I read her last name, I kept thinking Dimitrescu from Resident Evil.
Oh yeah. Giancarlo Esposito is Baxter Stockman.
Also a cameo role.
Yeah, he's barely in the movie.
He does not live long enough to have a larger role.
Jackie Chan, Splinter. Ice Cube, Superfly. Paul Rudd, Mondo Gecko. Post Malone is Ray Fillet. Hannibal Buress is Genghis Frog. And then just kind of other people. Derek Wilson.
Mr. Beast, I did not realize was
Yeah,
in this
no,
movie.
yeah, sorry.
Very goofy.
Mr. Beast had a very small voice.
Yeah.
Derek Wilson, I do know him. He was in Future Man, I think, which was a Hulu TV show with Josh Hutcherson.
Oh, okay.
And Seth Rogen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's probably how they... But yeah, the cast is stacked. Yeah. And apparently when recording, because most times because this is animated, typically when you record for an animated movie, you do all of your lines by yourself.
Yeah.
But for this one, they were all in a room together so that the energy could like actually be there, which definitely showed. Like I could tell that like they were feeding off of each other, even though it was an animated film, so you couldn't like see them feeding off of each other.
I have that in production notes later on, but Seth Rogen wanted to do that, or he thought about doing that based on his experience doing the the Lion King.
Oh right, yeah, I forgot that he was in that one.
Yeah,
the live action,
and just,
quote unquote.
Yeah, and then also like, so he had some experience doing that. That's not the typical thing. It's normally you're just one person in a studio by yourself. But then also just seeing all of the kids together, like in the kitchen or something like that, and they were all just making fun of each other and screaming over each other all at the same time. And he was like, that's
the energy he wanted.
Yeah, and that definitely comes across in the entire movie.
Them actually being kids and acting like kids, I think was great.
There were apparently, which is not surprising, but there were hundreds of like submissions for the audition process. Apparently Seth Rogen watched every single one, and then narrowed it down to like 10 kids or something like that, and then based the casting process off of a chemistry read with all of them together, and then these 4 are the ones that all made it. And we haven't actually said their names, but Micah Abbey, Nicholas Cantu, Shannon Brown Jr., and Brady Noon. I don't know much about their respective careers, or how established they are, but they definitely all make sense together.
And as we said, this is an animated film, and the animation is animation.
It's very stylistic.
Yes, which I like that they're giving it their own style, not doing just like a basic 3D rendering.
There's a couple reasons for that. One of them is they're co-directors for this movie, Kyler Spears and Jeff Rowe, or Rao, Rowe. But Jeff is the director of The Mitchells versus the Machines, and a bunch of other things like Gravity Falls and etc. He wanted to kind of continue the vibe of The Mitchells versus the Machines and do something against what people will expect from an animated movie, and also doing that with the animation style. And then it was also heavily inspired by like the high school sketchbooks that he would do. And kind
I can see that.
Keeping it in that kind of high schooler style of like, it's very imperfect. There's a lot of random impact lines in places that don't necessarily need them. Animators were apparently encouraged to make things like uglier or more closely resemble the concept art. Because I do feel like that's a thing that you see of like, you see the concept art of like Sully from Monsters Inc. or something like that, and you're like, what is that? That's so far removed from the final product. And they were kind of encouraged to like keep it in like their initial instinct, basically. And then it's also very like with that teenage art style of like exaggerated features, random lines, and then leaning into a more punk vibe is what they were going for. It does kind of read a little messy at times.
Yeah, when there's a lot of action and explosions and just like a lot of stuff happening, and a lot of this movie takes place at night because they're ninjas, so they have to sneak around. And so it's dark and there's a lot happening. It gets a little hard to look at just because there's so much stylization happening.
It's kind of input overload at some points, which I didn't really mind for the most part, but there were
a few times
definitely during like once it gets closer to the climax of the movie, I feel like I had to like turn part of my brain off to just let the images happen. Don't analyze them all that much, which like I want to appreciate the art style, but there's so much going on then it's hard to do that too.
The soundtrack
is great.
It's one of the best soundtracks we've heard this year, I'd say. I know Seth Rogen, when making the soundtrack, he said, I wanted to give the vibe of the Tony Hawk Skate 1 and 2 games.
Nice.
And I can definitely see that inspiration.
Yeah. I believe there are playlists for it on Spotify.
Have one small little complaint with it.
Okay.
A lot of this movie was modernizing the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which is great. That makes sense. But then all of the music is like 90s.
Yeah.
For the most part. Which it helped, and I think it's probably because this movie, from what I can tell, is aimed at parents who liked it growing up.
Yeah.
Who have young children who could get into a new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So like the music was more for the parents.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. I feel like, especially with how they portrayed these turtles, those turtles wouldn't have liked this music.
I don't know about that, because like everything is cyclical and retro is cool all the time, and now 90s is retro and the music applies to that.
So I agree, but my little cousin, he doesn't like that kind of music, and he's the same age as these turtles. And from what I can tell, and I'm not saying he, is every teenager ever. He, is just my insight into the youths.
Maybe. Liam isn't cool.
Well, that's a different story. But from what I can tell, Liam is sort of in just the general what is popular right now crowd. And it's not a lot of that music.
That's fair.
So I have a little issue with that.
Yeah.
Again, super great soundtrack. I don't know if it super fits, but
yeah.
I also wouldn't have liked this movie if the soundtrack was more modern rap and whatever is like popular, because I don't think that would have fit as
whatever
well.
the youths are into.
But I don't know. It just felt like a weird.
That's fair.
Shift.
I have no judgment of whether or not Liam is actually cool, but
no, you said it, and I'm telling. I'm gonna say, Liam, Maggie said you weren't cool, and he's gonna be like, okay.
Yeah. We can ask my cousin, see what music he's into.
That's true.
That's our population size. It's 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I really like I'm trying to figure out how to word this. So I have fewer issues with the movie than you did.
It's true.
At least when we initially walked out of the theater.
Yeah. Which was last week.
Yeah. Because I am very inexperienced with the franchise, just kind of like accepted the vibes that were given to me and didn't have a whole lot to compare them to from previous experience. But I do think that the soundtrack is kind of like another factor in this thing of just I really like the vibes. That's my whole takeaway from this movie. Spoiler. I like the whole vibes. And it is like if you look a little bit beneath the vibes into like the actual story structure or things like that, then things get much trickier.
Yes.
On whether or not it super holds up, or like the animation style is great. I thought the entire teaser trailer was like the perfect amount of like texture and everything. It was really cool. But then you see the whole movie and it kind of gets overwhelming at times. The soundtrack is kind of like that of like, I really like, again, the vibes of this movie. If I think about it too hard, about like, would these turtles actually be into 90s hip-hop, R&B, rap, whatever, I don't know. I don't know if that's a super established part of their character, but they don't really talk a whole lot about like what they are into. They make a lot of modern references to the point where I'm like, in 5 years, is this movie going to be understandable? Just because the internet moves so fast, like, will any of these references still be relevant? And I feel like one of the only other times that they mention music specifically is they mention briefly that like they go out into the world in secret because Splinter is afraid of humans and everything, and he doesn't want them to be exposed. But they mentioned briefly that they snuck into an Adele concert, and that's like kind of the only other time that they mention what they are into. And you can't really set Adele to this soundtrack. It would be an experience, but I don't know if it would be a good one.
Yeah, and so I guess we should say like what happens in this movie, right?
Yeah, we can talk about the plot.
So the plot of the movie is basically, they're turtles, then they're trying to fit in. And meanwhile, there is a string of robberies happening. And so the turtles think, well, if we, solve this case, the humans will love us. And so they meet April, who is the journalist April in this one. She's in high school as well. She's like figuring stuff out. Very talented for a high school journalist. Yeah.
She's got the whole board with the red strings and everything.
And in this telling, they were all created because Baxter.
All the mutants were created.
Yeah. Baxter Stockman was messing with stuff in his own personal lab, creating his own little family of mutant animals.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had all of his mutant animals, but then some of the ooze fell into the sewer and got onto the turtles and Splinter when they were little turtles and a rat. Now, how did the turtles get in the sewer? Great question. I don't know.
It doesn't mention that.
Yeah, it's rarely ever mentioned.
It's mentioned from, like the whole flashback sequence is from Splinter's POV.
Yeah.
And he's just like, I was a rat outcast. Other rats didn't like me.
Yeah.
Humans definitely didn't like rats. And then I found you guys. And when he finds them, then they're already in the ooze.
Yeah.
Kind of wiggling around. And then he gets in the ooze.
To get them out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it fast forwards like 14 years or whatever.
15.
15. The turtles are 14 or 15.
Mm-hmm.
There's a string of robberies. And the string of robberies are being done by the other mutants who are now kind of, it seems, they seem older than the turtles. Superfly definitely is, but the other ones also seemed older to me.
So in the whole other flashback sequence that the movie really starts off with, then it's Baxter Stockman in his lab with a little big baby fly that he made.
A baby-sized fly.
Yeah. And that fly already has like special abilities because it takes out a whole SWAT team, essentially. It's not SWAT, but whatever their actual company is. So then like Stockman dies, and then the fly takes as many samples of other mutants as it can to like continue on that family vision.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of the ooze just went missing. It just ends up in the sewer. It wasn't intentional. And then I guess they really only show the other mutants like very briefly. Like Superfly is the only one who's out of the tube. He's like older, but there's no indication of like how long he's been out of the tubes. And then you basically just see like little baby Rhino is floating in ooze.
And so like now we're in the present. Superfly is basically, he's creating a device, and the device is going to kill all the humans and then turn every living thing into a mutant.
He wants to change basically the natural social structure, or what we view as the natural social structure, so humans aren't at the top of the food chain anymore.
And so the turtles are trying to stop that.
Mm-hmm. And
then Superfly, so eventually the turtles, I'm skipping a lot because a lot of it I don't think is super important, unfortunately. The turtles basically convince the other mutants that Superfly is doing a bad thing.
Well, so they were already kind of hesitant to do it, but
well, that's what we were told.
Yeah.
They never really show that.
True. According to the mutants, they were already hesitant about committing mass genocide.
Yeah.
And then the turtles were like,
so don't,
please.
And they're like, we never knew that was an option.
But Superfly is like their big brother. He's also kind of like the patriarch of their little family unit. So they felt like essentially they had never told him no for anything because they never had a reason to. So then they just kept going along with everything until he became a villain. And then they were like, oh no, wait.
So they convince, they all join together to fight Superfly to stop the machine from going off.
Mm-hmm.
They stop it from going off. It falls into the river. It goes off in the river with Superfly, and then somehow that causes him to turn into a giant kaiju mutant, basically, where it takes a bunch of other animals and they form together like Voltron to create one giant kaiju.
Yeah.
And so he starts attacking the city. The turtles and the other mutants start defending the city. April O'Neil gets onto a broadcast and says that these mutants are good. Don't hurt them. They're trying to help.
Yeah, because at first it's like exactly what the turtles feared, and everyone is afraid of them because they just see like mutants across the board. And they're like all bad, got it. And then April has to be like,
nah,
no.
they're good. And then New York is like, hey, okay.
Yeah, everyone unanimously was like, let's believe this 15-year-old with zero evidence to back up her claims. And we're just going to be like, turtles good, got it.
And I know this is a children's movie. So we need to be nice about this being a children's movie. But they all join together, they stop Superfly. Then the city is like, hey, okay, you guys are cool with us, and the turtles go to high school. And everyone is totally cool with it. April is now a beloved student because, you know, she helped save New York City.
Yeah.
That's like the basic plot.
Do you want to talk about April, or do you have other?
Oh yeah, April. Yeah, we can talk about April.
So I like this version of April.
I agree.
I again not super familiar with a lot of versions of her, but the stuff that I have seen, like in the 90s movies, then they really don't give her a whole lot to do. Like she's emotionally significant to them, but then
in the first two,
yeah,
she does the most, I think, because the first one, like, she's a journalist, you know, she wants to be a news anchor, and she's working her way to that, and she's cracking the story. She's like asking the police chief these hard-hitting questions. The second one, she is an anchor. She's following a story about this lab that is doing these tests.
Like it doesn't totally brush her aside in the way that other 90s movies have to women, and
she is a part of the crew, just not a Ninja Turtle.
April is still significant to this group. I feel like they make her like more significant, or I don't know, she's just
they give her more personality just with like throwaway lines, and not like 90s woman throwaway lines of just like I went shopping.
Yeah, she's good. I was looking at articles, and then I was like, actually this sucks, and I don't want to quote anything, but people were obviously gross online, unfortunately, about this version of April physically, because she is 1, black, 2, not skinny. So that's the perfect combo for internet trolls.
She was, you know, a realistic New York high school student. Like that's she's fine. She looks like a regular person. That's the whole thing with this animation style is like people and characters and everyone will have imperfections, and you will see that. And then internet saw that and was like, I hate this fictional 14-year-old. Yeah. So that's fun. But
personality wise, the movie does a lot with her. Yeah. She has anxiety. Like a whole big thing about this movie is everyone is really a teenager. Yeah. So she tries to do her local news or the school news, and then she throws up. She becomes a meme. And then she goes on to, she has to overcome her anxiety and get in front of the camera and do this to the New York news and tell them that the turtles are good and everything. She throws up again, but then she's like cool about it this time. And then the movie kind of does a thing that a lot of movies do, where the climax happens and then the woman is just like gently pushed aside and does not participate in anything that happens. This almost does that, but it's in a way that makes sense of like the turtles have been training their whole lives to face some sort of threat. They're facing the threat. April is still a human child, and like this is the best way that she can help, is to speak for them, basically. So it's not, I'm not mad about it, the fact that like I don't need her to throw a punch in this movie.
I think April is probably the character they got most right, in my opinion. And obviously, like I said earlier, my favorite comic line of the Turtles is the newer one, and that is a retelling. They changed the backstory. In that one, April isn't a journalist; she's a scientist, which I actually like quite a bit, because she is able to do more. Like
that still makes sense to me. Yeah,
she can help with the turtles and like all the fight stuff, and then Donatello, who is like the nerdy one and scientist, has someone to like bounce ideas off of instead of just being like made fun of for being the dork. She works for Baxter Stockman. I like that one a lot. But the journalist one is the main thing that she's pretty much always been.
Yeah.
And I think this is true to that.
Mm-hmm.
The other characters not really doing that for me.
It is, again, children's movie, but
yes.
That was.
And I'm like, I love retellings.
Yeah.
That's great. But if the characters aren't the characters, then why use the name, like the branding?
It was a bit tropey.
Yes. And a lot of it was told that this is what's happening, but nothing was really shown. Like Michelangelo, he's the funny, goofy younger brother. Like that's pretty typical for this story and universe. But stuff in this one was just like, out of nowhere, he was like, whoa, I can sign up for an improv club. I love improv.
Yeah.
And it was just like, but you haven't, like, he's just kind of, he was in the background for a lot. Like, I noticed, like, there were scenes where even, like, it's animated, so obviously they figure out the blocking and everything.
Yeah.
Like, they make it themselves. But there were scenes where he was behind his other brothers, and you couldn't even see him.
There were several parts where it was like, part of it is like Leonardo is kind of separated from the rest of them because he, like, I was trying to say ratted out, and then it was like, no, the movie didn't like that because Splinter's a rat. He tattled on them to Splinter.
He's more the goody two shoes and the leader, and that's
so
always true.
They physically separate him from the other three for a little bit, but besides that, there are several other moments where it will just frame up only three of them.
Yeah.
Which
I understand framing 4 is like not super
it's not
easy.
Great, but it is like the thing that this franchise is known for.
Yeah, the 4 of them.
Yeah.
But like Michelangelo, I felt like barely made any jokes unless he was saying he was making a joke, and then Donatello had more one-liners, and like I know that like before like the big tech thing was like a thing for Donatello's character. Donatello was another like wisecracker. In the 90s movies, he does a lot of wisecracking too. I mean, they all do, but like it was sort of split between Mikey and Donnie. And I just thought it was weird that like they still made Donatello sort of the techie one, but then he was still making more jokes from what I remember than Michelangelo. And it just didn't quite feel right to me. Raphael is always supposed to be like the angry one.
Yeah.
I think the 90s movies do a great explanation as to why. Like they kind of show like he's already a moody teenager, right? And so like he goes out on his own, and then he basically gets jumped. Yeah. And he sees just how bad the world is, right? That is enough to cause like someone in a tight 90 movie to be the cranky, angry one for the rest of the franchise.
Yeah, it shows pretty quickly. Like they have a complicated relationship with humans, and this is a source for his anger. In
the comic that I read, the newer one, he is an angry one in that because he got separated from the rest of the turtles. Basically, he was oozed, but they weren't grown yet, and he got separated. He fell from the other ones, and so he grew up on his own in the streets of New York City, trying to figure stuff out. So that caused a lot of anger, and that super makes sense to me. In this one, they keep saying he's angry, but he's not.
I think the way that they justify it in this is, again, the teenage thing, where they're just like, kind of, everyone is experiencing hormones in different ways.
Yeah.
Where Leonardo is now, like, he's interested in April. He's interested in, like, girls and dating.
Yeah.
And that's, like, a part of hormones. And then the way that, which one is it? Angry one? Raphael. The way that Raphael is experiencing hormones is through just rage, just for reasons.
But I feel like they barely show it.
He's not even that angry. I feel like in this version, they say that he's angry. He's just big. He doesn't come across as angry. He comes like across as like
football brother,
physically strong. Yeah, he's the jock.
But then at the end, they're like, Raph, use that rage and focus it on this. He's like, yeah, I can do that.
And then they couch it a little bit where they're like, we're gonna get you some therapy, buddy. Like,
but like it's never really shown. And I understand that a big part of why this movie is telling instead of showing is because they stacked the characters. Everyone is in this movie, and so like they're trying to introduce all of these characters, but also focus on the main squad. Leonardo, I'd say that he's still pretty close to his, because Leonardo's like, I don't know, he's the leader, and the leader exterior wise is always the most boring one because they have to be, they are the path, and they are good. Obviously in the comics they find ways to make it more interesting and stuff.
Yeah. I saw in some interview Nicholas Cantu said, or like they all wanted to give some sort of, like they all wanted to make their characters their own, which makes sense. Nicholas was saying that like he wanted to make Leonardo more nervous because he's like not a reluctant leader, but just an incredibly inexperienced one, where they do again say not show that Leonardo is the leader of all of them. It seems like a pretty predetermined thing before the movie starts. Like this is an already established fact, and then now Leonardo has to deal with that, and he's like, he doesn't know what he's doing, so he wanted to make that a character choice of like, this is a nervous boy.
And I get that. I do like that. I think that's good. Splinter, for this movie, it fits. I don't like it. I really don't like it. He hates all humans, which is rare. I feel like rarely a thing that Splinter does. Splinter is always cautious of humans. He understands that like if his sons were to go up into the real world, the humans probably wouldn't accept them, and so he's looking out for his kids. That has always been a thing. That's always a thing.
They do show with this in that flashback sequence of like he
tried once.
The turtles were always interested in the human world, so then he tried once when they were really young to bring them up there, and then it super didn't go well. So then they went back underground. He
basically has PTSD of humans. And a lot of trauma there. But he, I don't know, is like sort of a weird conspiracy theorist prepper type of
I really thought they were going to... He's like... He's not that bad. He's just incredibly nervous about everything. But I really thought for a bit that he was going to go like... Not QAnon, but like very tinfoil hat.
No, like that was the vibes they were giving this character.
Because we have not talked about this at all. One of the recurring jokes that they have is like, I think it's supposed to be like an out of touch parent bit where he's like, you're gonna go up there, and the humans are gonna find you, they're gonna hate you, and then they're gonna milk you.
Yeah.
And that's like a reoccurring thing that happens, and then they're like, that's obviously not true.
Yeah.
And then later on,
they get milked.
There's a milking machine
for some reason.
It's fine.
And another thing with this one is that they had no prior martial arts experience or connection to ninjutsu. But then when they went out into the real world the first time and it didn't go well, and Splinter got super nervous, he just watched YouTube, and then he taught his kids from YouTube, which means he wasn't actually a martial arts master. He had no background in it whatsoever, and so he was learning as they were learning. And so every time we see the four turtles and Splinter fight for the first time in this movie is their first time fighting in their lives. And so like I like that. Like it is just like a very like, you're seeing where they're starting, right?
I like the concept of a parent learning along with their kids.
Yes.
That's interesting to me.
The first time that Splinter fights.
After they're milked.
Splinter comes in and saves the day and fights everyone. One, he kills like many of them.
Yeah, you see the
kill count of Splinter in this children's movie is wild. He takes one of their batons and slams it into their face through it.
You see like the turtles' first fight is in that garage. April's scooter gets stolen and they beat up the bad guys basically who stole it. You see them being very nervous, and like everyone, it's that type of fighting where if you don't think about it in a kids show, it's like, yeah, everyone got knocked out. We're not going to think about the what happens when you get a concussion or the long-term side effects of that. And then Splinter shows up, and he
kills people.
He stabs through the face mask. Like there's no, it's very obvious that like your dad is killing for you.
And also in this fight scene, he's super nervous still.
Yeah.
And he like runs away to get away from people.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could say it's a tactical retreat, but like he's nervously and scared running away.
He gets really lucky through a lot of it,
which is just not Splinter. It's not.
Mm.
And I know that they did this because Splinter is voiced by Jackie Chan, and that was a very Jackie Chan fight scene. Like he was like using things around him, like a rolling chair with the wheels and like spinning them and stuff.
Yeah,
very much like Jackie Chan.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that they did it specifically for that, but it's just not who Splinter is. And I get it, it's a retelling, they're making the characters different.
Yeah,
it just didn't resonate with me a lot, like a long-term Turtles fan. I also have a problem. I have a lot of problems.
This is fine. This is the section of my notes where it just says Sebastian's thoughts go here.
Yep. So they all grew up in New York City. All of the kids have like pretty New York accents, and Splinter sounds like Jackie Chan because he's voiced by Jackie Chan. But why? Like I
in the lore, there's a reason for it.
I know that this is a children's movie, and I shouldn't dive this deep into it.
Yeah.
But I am genuinely confused. Why?
I mean,
because in those the 2016 live action turtle movies that Michael Bay produced or whatever, Splinter is voiced by Tony Shalhoub, and that makes sense to me. I'm not saying it's right, but it at least makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. You can, I don't know, it wasn't a huge issue to me because I was just like, yeah, Jackie Chan is here. Like, it's just it
wouldn't have been an issue to me had they not established that he had no connection to martial arts or ninjutsu.
Yeah.
It was purely, I was a outcast rat. None of the other rats liked me. I also got oozed, and I learned from YouTube martial arts.
You don't really see any of them learning to speak or anything like that. It didn't bother me that much just because what's her face? Is it Leatherhead? The crocodile? Has an Australian accent.
Yeah.
And
so I guess some of it is just built into the DNA is what they're saying, but
also,
why is the rat?
Ice Cube sounds like Ice Cube as Superfly. Like he talks he speaks very differently than Paul Rudd does.
It's true.
So
it's
like
true. I know I shouldn't have, like, that is a problem I know I shouldn't have, but I have it. And you can't stop me.
All right.
I think, I mean, obviously there wasn't much character development there, but Mondo Gecko by Paul Rudd was also pretty close to who Mondo Gecko is.
He was fun.
I do have a little bit of a problem that they sort of redeemed all of the other mutants. Rocksteady and Bebop are antagonists, and there's nothing in this movie that says they won't still be antagonists. They just, also decided genocide wasn't cool. But I don't know. It was weird to me that because some of these characters are sometimes allies, sometimes like kind of antagonists. Not like they usually fight for the same thing, but they're also like doing their own thing.
Yeah.
I will say I am not familiar with Superfly. I don't remember. I think no, I know for sure. I know for sure Superfly is an established character.
Oh, okay.
I don't know him that well. In the comic line that I read, they have a character who is sort of along the same mindset of humans are bad. Let's turn humans into mutants. Not a fly. He's a cat.
Yeah.
And I feel like if they had that character concept, like I don't know if they just didn't want to pull from that, if Superfly was originally like this in the original stories, because also I think a lot of these characters are from the original cartoon and not just the comics.
I think so.
And I know more about the comics than the cartoons.
Yeah. I did not realize that Superfly was an established character because from the little that I read about...
I mean, I'll look it up, but I'm almost positive.
Yeah, the little that I read about different actors coming on board, then Ice Cube joined because they told him the character's name is Superfly, and he laughed at that.
Yeah.
And then he also said, like, my kids love the Ninja Turtles. Of course I'll do it. So it, to me,
Okay.
like, from the context of that, it seemed like they pitched this idea to him, and then he said yes.
So so it is established.
Okay.
In the 1987 series, an experiment gone wrong turns Baxter into Superfly.
Yes, that's right.
A giant mutant horsefly.
I forgot. I have that written down for later in my notes because at one point they considered making Baxter the villain of this movie.
Because he's typically a major antagonist across the board.
Yeah.
So I mean, again, entertaining movie. As a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fan, I have problems, but I think even outside of having problems with like the characters, the movie does so much telling and not showing because they opened their scope so wide for the first one.
They cram a lot into this.
Like,
and like
if they had just been like, whoa, Superfly, you're another mutant that we didn't know about? That's crazy. And had none of the other extra mutants. They could have established all of those characters so much more instead of just telling us. Because I think a lot of what this movie is relying on is an already established understanding of who the Turtles are, at least. Which is why a lot of it is like, oh yeah, Leonardo's the leader, Michelangelo's the funny one, he's the rage guy, he's the tech guy. But it's changed it enough for it to be like, but these aren't the same characters. So I have that problem.
I think you've just described what rebooting a series is, like the whole problem with
just
it.
Don't do it then.
Because this is like, this is the 7th movie for this franchise. There's only so much that you can do.
The 7th movie, really?
Yeah. That's what all the articles that I read, all 3 of the articles that I read.
3 and 2, and then there was one animated Nickelodeon one that I know about.
Sure.
Wait.
I think this is I read that this is Nickelodeon Studios' first CG animated movie.
Yeah, the last one that they did with the Turtles was the 2D animation style, and that was Ben Schwartz as Leonardo.
Oh,
yeah,
neat.
Yeah, I think those are all the gripes I have. I love this franchise, so being able to see any of it is fun.
Yeah. I will say from what I have read, then it seems like the script went through a lot of different versions, and like they basically didn't know like which version of the story they were trying to tell, if they were trying to highlight like these are young turtles, or if they were trying to show like trying to expand the world basically. So I feel like a lot of that chaos, like this is a very tight script. Like this version that exists now, it hits all of the beats exactly when you think they're going to, which is to me was a little boring, but again,
it was
we're
a
not
rushed
children.
movie in my opinion. A lot of it was just like because there was so much, they just crammed it in. Like all of a sudden it was like, we're working together now. Yeah, we won.
But that's why I think a lot of the telling versus showing exists, is because like they just finally got to a point where they were like, we need to explain that this thing is happening so that this next thing can happen, and then we can explain the world that we're creating. Production facts or anything else you want to talk about?
Well, I was gonna say that they kind of left it up in the air for a sequel.
Oh, I've got info on that.
Okay, never mind. Yeah. Production facts.
This was released in theaters August 2nd, 2023. That release date was moved around a couple of times, but it eventually was released earlier than what they originally announced. It's a runtime of 1 hour 39 minutes, and it has a PG rating, so definitely we're not necessarily the target audience. Ratings for it are 96% on Rotten Tomatoes with a 90% audience score, 74 out of 100 on Metacritic, and an A on Cinema Score.
96 is high.
People like this movie.
I'm glad they like it.
Yeah.
I like when Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is in the limelight.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that high.
Well, I found an article or a review that kind of agrees with you, but like this is like the ending paragraphs of an otherwise very positive New York Times article. It says, in the end, there's little complexity to the characters and no surprise to the plot, and even the messaging about tolerance, good intentions, and outsiders finding their brood is so unimaginatively expressed that it feels cliche. A film unintentionally stuck in its own kind of adolescence, Mutant Mayhem has plenty of charm, but tries so hard to be cool, funny, and relevant, so totally online, that it forgets to kick back with a slice, some buds, and just, vibe.
Yeah, so that can be summarized with how I feel. I want to love this movie.
Yeah.
I enjoy it.
Yeah. I think the teaser trailer set it really high, and then I think it's just like being an adolescent movie or focusing on the fact that these are Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, then we've aged out of that as being totally relevant.
Yeah.
I do also think I've got some issues with the New York Times as a publication, and this does read, especially the last sentences of being so totally online, it does read like kind of, who cares about the youths?
Yeah. Was it a successful movie with how high it was reviewed?
So I think, I forget the exact math of like what we talked about with the D&D movie, but overall, everyone is saying yes. So the budget was $70 million. At box office as of September 13th, it has a worldwide gross of $162 million, and $112 million of that is from US and Canada. It was projected to earn $30 million over the first 5 days of release, and it earned $45 million, so it's performed a little more than expected.
Yeah.
Like we've mentioned a lot, the big focus that Seth Rogen had, which we haven't talked about him at all this episode.
He is the driving force behind this. He voices Bebop.
He is credited as a producer and a co-writer.
Yeah.
I forget if he has a screenplay by or a story by credit.
I did want to say, I forgot about this. The introduction of Rocksteady and Bebop.
Very good.
I loved that. They were playing music and they were just kind of like.
They're just vibing.
They're just dancing to the music and like being tough, but like still dancing.
Yeah.
I loved that.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
So a quote from Seth Rogen talking about the tone that he wanted to set for the movie. He says, as a lifelong fan of Ninja Turtles, weirdly the teenage part of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was always the part that stuck out to me the most. And as someone who loves teenage movies and who's made a lot of teenage movies and who literally got their start in the entire profession by writing a teenage movie, the idea of kind of honing in on that element was really exciting to us. I mean, not disregarding the rest, but really using that as kind of a jumping off point for the film. That's definitely the intention with a lot of it, especially with like the actors being so young and the way that they're just so excited about the concept of high school. Mm-hmm. And like it is a little tropey, but they really all are trying to like, they're very young and they're discovering who they are and their interests and finding other people like them, and like teenagers want to fit in. That's like a whole thing that you experience at some point in your life. And I think that makes sense. It is also pretty obvious that like this is what Seth Rogen's vision is, just with the way that he's credited in the teaser trailer where it says professional teenager or permanent teenager Seth Rogen. So it all seems to be the way that he wanted. I also found this quote from co-director Jeff Rowe that I thought was very funny. He wanted it to be the ultimate coming of age film and then compared it to Stand By Me and Lady Bird.
Huh.
Two wildly different movies.
I'm trying to. I can see Stand By Me.
Yeah.
I feel like
it's not Lady Bird.
I feel like he was put on the spot and needed to think of
like another relevant teenage
movie
that wasn't something that Seth Rogen made.
Yeah. Which like looks smart.
Yeah.
But like Stand By Me even, I'm just like, why?
I will almost give it to him just because a huge part of Lady Bird is like the parent child dynamic, and that is also a big part of this movie is like kids growing up, parenting changes as kids age, or so I've heard. And that's a big focus of Lady Bird as well. It's a much more serious movie because 9/11 is a huge factor in that plot.
I mean, this takes place in New York, so 9/11 is always a huge factor.
Awful.
Do you think the turtles forgot? Anyways. I hear that they also wanted to make the turtles more relatable.
Yeah, where'd you hear that?
Is that true?
Yeah. So, that's partially why a lot of the source material was kind of ignored or put to the side, like a lot of the things that you have mentioned that you have issues with. We also didn't mention earlier, but Maya Rudolph's character, Cynthia Utram, you told me at one point.
Oh yeah, I mean, should we say? I don't want to spoil this for people who don't know.
Follow your heart.
Follow my heart. My heart's wherever you are.
Ew.
Okay, I'll say it.
Yeah.
Utram is the name of the aliens in this universe that created the ooze. So I don't know if they're going that route,
this version,
or if they're just using the name and being like, this.
It's an Easter egg if you get it.
This Eastern European woman created the ooze.
This version kind of implies that, what's his name, Baxter, made the ooze, and it doesn't have alien origins. But so like. Jeff Rowe said in an interview, there was a lot of things that we were skated past, and we took a lot of time to make it really operate from a place of character and relatability that I think will be shockingly emotional. The goal early on in our conversation with Seth Rogen, where we want people to leave the theater and be like, I can't believe I just cried at a Ninja Turtles movie. But another part of that interview was he was saying like they had, in order to make it more relatable, they had to make it, the word that he used was more logical, which I feel like you've got Teenage and Mutant and Ninja and Turtle in the title of your thing. You don't necessarily need to have logic as a factor of that.
Yeah, this was never a franchise that was a grounded franchise. This was not Christopher Nolan's The Batman.
But I get what he means in terms of like, maybe let's leave the aliens out of this equation for this particular version.
Fair.
Yeah.
It's not necessary.
Yeah, but the relatability of like, we've talked about the parenting aspect a lot. It really feels like this movie was made for fans of the franchise who now have kids and like this is a easier way to introduce your kids to this franchise too. Yeah. Also, Shredder was originally the villain of the movie, but then they changed it to Superfly and like a fellow mutant that the turtles would then be able to relate to, because they've been so isolated, and then you meet someone that you can kind of look up to, and then oh no, they're not who you thought they were. They wanted that to be an element of the story as well.
We get a post-credit scene where we see Shredder. And for those of you who don't know, Shredder is like the bad guy of this franchise.
He's the head of the foot?
Yes.
He's the neck of the foot. He's the ankle of the foot. Like we mentioned, the voice recording was done in groups, not in individual sessions. I do really like the dialogue of the movie. A lot of it was.
I agree with that.
A lot of it was improvised, which I always feel iffy about saying that something was improvised, because I feel like that implies like yes-anding, like improvise exercises. versus just like they're just talking to each other. Like they're just
having a good time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good dynamic between all of them. So there is a follow-up TV show in some stage of production for Paramount Plus called Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and there is a sequel film in development. So
it's TTMNT.
Yeah. According to Variety, 2 seasons of the show are currently planned.
Oh, wow.
And bridge between the 2 films. And then the show will be 2D animation, and all 4 Ninja Turtle voice actors will be staying on for the show. I don't know about anyone else.
Can't imagine they got Jackie for that.
I don't know. Yeah, I thought it was interesting that they're switching to 2D. I wonder how much the art style will change.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's so much cheaper.
I'm guessing it's shorter than like all of that layers and texture and everything like that. I also read as part of the description for the show that it really seems like it isolates the brothers from each other. I don't know if it's showing them navigating high school.
Oh, because and they find their own groups, and then they have to come back together, defeat Shredder in the movie.
Something like that. It's like part of the post-credits / credits of the movie is showing them in kind of their tropey things, but it's like home videos essentially of them experiencing high school. They are fully embraced by the school. Like,
yeah, I just want to say how another thing with Splinter being so nervous that that them being able to go to high school at the end of the movie makes no sense. In no world, even if he's like, oh, okay, humans do accept us, he's not going to say, yeah, go to high school, because that is so irresponsible. Clearly they just made enemies. Yeah. They just got milked 15 minutes prior. And now they're like, yeah, we're going to send you to a public institution where you can be followed back to our private little secluded sewer home. No. What, you go missing one day and then New York is like, hey, what happened to those turtles? We should probably investigate. No. They're not going to investigate. They're going to be like, I guess they died. I guess they're in a soup now. Right? That's what's going to happen. I do not approve.
You want them to be homeschooled?
Yes.
Anyway, the home videos show them in like the techie one is with like the coders, and then the improv one is doing the improv, and the jock one is doing wrestling, and the other one is with April. Yeah.
He's what the kids would call a simp.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting when we watched it in the theater, like the kind of the final images that we have of them, besides them all being at the homecoming dance. The final images that we have of them is them all separated from each other. So it seems like the show will continue that. And I don't know how isolated they are, like how much of it is like the plot is isolating them, and how much is them just being teenagers who don't want to hang out with their brothers right now.
That is interesting. I mean, a big theme throughout all of the media of the Turtles is like the brothers are stronger when they are together.
Right.
So I can see that being a thing.
Yeah. Another random thing that we kind of touched on earlier, and I thought of it because like when the Turtles first have their plan of like, we'll stop Superfly and then everyone will love us, then they're like, it's over exaggerated of like, they say a guy from the Bronx or something is like, I'm from the Bronx, I love the Turtles, and someone's like, sign my baby, and then you see that actually happen when everything is saved and whatever. The April has the vomit gif thing, which is like not a huge fan of vomit humor or like bodily function humor, as we've talked about in the Somebody
Unless it's cum.
I don't want to see that here either, because they are, again, minors.
Well, I have to take it there. I wasn't saying that. I wasn't saying that. Jeez.
Anyway. Part of the expectations of like everything's cool now is like April wanted to stop Superfly so that like people would remember her for something different than just vomiting, and then you see her at the end and like also the same expectations, people being like even on her locker it's like it's scribbled out like vomit girl and now it says cool girl or something like that, and it's just like, no, people would still call you vomit girl every once in a while. That's just how teenagers work.
But now it would be said with admiration.
Yeah, they'd be like, vomit girl. My last few things that I have are like basically everyone who's credited as like actual voice actor on this, they have relatively few lines, so it's kind of cameos anyway, but other cameos. Kevin Eastman, who is co-creator of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, has a voice cameo as the human who helps Splinter up in the movie's climax, and the character is credited as Good Human. And then the co-director Jeff Rowe also has a cameo and is credited as a man who loves being young and free to go places.
Sure.
Yep. Good for Jeff.
I do like that they got Kevin Eastman.
Yeah.
To be something in it.
He's pretty happy with it, with the movie. From everything that I can see, he seems excited with I don't know like specifically the direction it's going, but the fact that it has impacted a younger generation.
And I think that part is great.
Yeah,
I love that younger generations are still into this, but
the
story is fine. It's not that great, but you know, it's fine.
Anything else we want to talk about before we get to our ratings?
Nope.
Cool.
Ratings! We have a rating system which is out of 4 with 5 options. 0 out of 4 is, oh no, you should stop making movies. 1 out of 4 is that certainly was a movie. We watched a movie. 2 is this is a well-made movie. It used to be different. In our first few episodes, it used to be something else, but at this point, it doesn't matter. It's now, that's a well-made movie.
It's always been a well-made movie now.
3 is enjoyable and kind of technically good. 4 is Oscar worthy.
What's your rating?
My rating is a 2 out of 4.
I'm shocked. I've never heard this information before.
Yeah. Because it's a well-made movie. And like I said, I did say I enjoyed this movie, so based off of our description, I should probably have this as a 3 out of 4. But there's more things I didn't like about this movie than I liked, so it got knocked down to a 2 out of 4. What's yours?
Mine. Drum roll.
It's a wet one.
It's a 3 out of 4.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That was worth wet drum roll.
I enjoyed this movie. Again, I really like the vibes. If I don't think about it, like, if I don't break it down super hard, then
break it down now.
It's, then it seems great.
Yeah.
It's obviously got a couple of things that I would like it to do differently or just like in a more interesting direction. But again, it's a kid's movie. Yeah. It's not geared for me, and that's fine, I guess.
Well, I'm going to act like it was.
But I do really like it, and there are a lot more positives than negatives for me as a casual observer.
I'm just too much of a knowledged person when it comes.
You're just too smart.
I'm too smart for this movie. No, just in terms of Ninja Turtles knowledge, I was too established in my head of.
That's fair. Yeah. All right.
Well, another thing that we always talk about after we talk about our main movie for the episode, which is over now, we talk about a different movie that we watched recently, because we watch movies.
Brag.
Not just movies that have come out this year. I don't know what movie you and I have watched.
It can be whatever.
But I watched the other night when I slept on this couch, Grease, and I gotta say, I'm into Grease. I don't.
Hot take.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't really feel like a movie I'd be into.
I don't know.
I don't typically like musicals. I will say I like on-screen musicals. So like if there's a musical episode or like a musical movie, I am more into it then.
You're not a huge musical person, but you are a cheesy teen rom-com person.
That's true. And this is such a goofy movie.
Yeah.
And I just think it's so funny. I love it. Danny Zuko is so silly, and I don't think it would have worked with anyone outside of John Travolta playing him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anyone else could give off the wonderful vibes that he gives when he sees Sandy at the high school for the first time, and he goes, "Sandy!" Like, I just don't think anyone else could have done it.
I can talk about a movie that I've watched recently then.
Mm-hmm.
Young Frankenstein. Watched that the other night. Had a similar thing of like, I don't think anyone else could be Frankenstein for this one. Of just like, I mean, it's like another one of those random film facts that people repeat all the time of like, everyone had such a good time making this movie that they made it longer so that everyone could keep working on it. And that's just really great. And it's a good movie with so many silly little bits that
I will say that is definitely a better movie than Grease.
Yeah.
And I probably like Young Frankenstein more than I like Grease. Mm-hmm. So like I am aware. Okay?
Okay.
All right, you don't have to come at me.
Okay.
In the comments. Or you can.
Transition.
Segue. Yeah. Let us know if you have questions in the comments.
Mm-hmm.
We do a show now. It should be out already by the time this episode airs.
By the time this one, yeah.
Yeah. Called Virtual House Sessions, where a lot of that is, interacting with the community, talking, answering questions, reading comments, just that kind of stuff.
Giving updates on different projects that we're working on.
So if you have comments on our reviews, if you disagree, if you agree, let us know. If you have questions about the movies, let us know. Mm-hmm. If there's a movie you want us to discuss, let us know.
That is going to be a monthly podcast, so there might be a little bit of a delay to responding to questions, comments, hopes and dreams, etc. But we will, and we'll do it there.
Will also be a Patreon show as of right now.
Yeah.
Right now we're saying it's a Patreon show. That might change. Who knows? Mm-hmm. But the first episode is free for everyone. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching / listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode.
Follow and review us places if you want.
Yeah, Instagram. Any of your podcast listening places, follow it. Because the way that all of those dumb services work is that even if you look up the podcast word for word, it shows you
similar podcasts already have views.
Yeah, that have like more views or established or they're getting more traffic.
Yeah.
So the more traffic we get, the bigger we can become.
The easier it is to find, which would be super convenient.
So follow us on Instagram, support our Patreon, and
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. We will see you next week.
Bye.